huge gaps in my
practical
basically
stuff.
Never met a girl when I left school. Couldn't rewire a plug. Didn't know how to change a tyre on a car, but I could express all that in grammatically perfect Latin. So it was, there were good points and bad points, I guess.
You learned Latin?
Yes, yeah. I did Latin and ancient Greek, just in case. Things always make a comeback.
You had to? Was it like part of the...
I can't remember if it was compulsory, but I really liked it, and I ended up studying it at university, as did my wife, and that's how we met. So Latin basically found me a life partner. So
what was it about Latin, do you think?
I don't know. I guess there's a sort of fascination in this civilization that grew and flourished and then faded, and the same with the ancient Greeks. I always prefer the ancient Greek side of my studies, and it was a fascinating studying a completed civilization, and particularly when you think of the upheavals that America has been going through of late, and there are certain patterns that obviously recur through history as civilizations rise and fall. So
is this where you're telling me I got to leave?
I'm not sure exactly what point of I don't know if the Visigoths are at the gate yet.
Close. They're at the Capitol. They were yesterday.
I think the Visigoths are a bit more organised than that.
Yeah, thank God. That's the one blessing is they had no idea what they were there. Once they got in, they didn't know what to do other than take pictures and ruin things.
Yes, and try and steal a lectern.
That guy. So, but so that you had a sort of fascination with the fading of empire, or the
yeah, which as a Brit growing up in the late 20th century was probably quite a useful thing to have.
Yeah.
And I studied ancient Greek comedy, which was absolutely fascinating.
Like Aeschylus?
Well, he was tragic. It was Aristophanes was the main...
Aristophanes, right. The clouds, right?
Yes, yeah. And...
didn't one of those open with like a farting contest? There's
a lot of farting in it. And it was because it was performed to sort of all layers of society. It operates on a huge number of levels comedically. There's fart jokes, there's sex jokes, and there's literary parody and political satire, all kind of wodged into one. And it was absolutely fascinating. I was with my wife on holiday in Greece about 15 years ago, and there was a production of the Aristophanes' Frogs in the ancient Roman theatre on the side of the Acropolis in Athens.
In Greek?
In modern Greek. But we happened to have a translation of it with us on holiday because I was doing a radio show about ancient Greece just after that, and I was trying to read up on stuff that I'd forgotten from 15 years ago. So we happened to have a translation. We could sort of follow along with it. And it was really amazing seeing jokes that were almost 2,500 years old still making people laugh, basically, a couple of hundred yards away from where they were first performed in about 400 BC. It was one of the most sort of inspirational comedic comedy watching moments that I've had. It felt like, time had ceased to exist as a concept. People were still laughing at the same stuff, 2,400 years on.
It's inspiring to know that if you structure your act correctly, you never have to change it.
Well, there's that as well. Yeah.
Is that if you rely on farts and subliminal sex jokes, you can go for centuries.
And a lot of they were not subliminal. A lot of those sex jokes, they were liminal.
But that is sort of fascinating because, in this day and age, you'd be like, "Well, that's hacky." It's like it's hacky, but there are human truths,
yes,
that have remained embarrassingly funny since the beginning of humans.
Yes, yeah, and I think they will always, I think it's something that is really missing from sci-fi set in long distant future. There's not enough people still laughing at flatulence. And
well, flatulence is always surprising on a couple of ways. You've got the noise itself. Yeah. You've got the duration of the noise. Yeah. But and then there's the third one, the smell. So that's 3 levels right there.
Yeah, and I don't know how they operate in deep space. Maybe there's the human body works differently, but would think that's something that sci-fi moving forward.
Oh, sure. I don't I've in the right stuff. You got a guy peeing in a spacesuit. I don't know. I've not seen flatulence explored. Like the inability to get away from your own flatulence in the suit.
Yeah.
And maybe that causes deaths. Maybe that's it. An entire ship of guys in suits get some food poisoning and they all die, and it's a tremendous mystery for floating around in space for centuries.
Right. I mean, it sounds like we're workshopping a film pitch here, Mark.
We are, right. And the punchline is, oh, my God, they shit in their suits.
There we go. It's high culture.
So, okay, so ended up with a degree in ancient Greece and Latin?
Yeah.
From what college?
Well, I was at University College in Oxford.
Is that the Oxford?
Yes,
Oxford?
Yeah. So I left with this degree, but no real idea what I wanted to do in life.
But the education, right? See, this is like I want to demystify.
Yeah.
Like I've recently, as time goes on, Harvard is completely demystified. They make monsters there, and they don't necessarily, it's careerism. But there is some good things about it. But there is a type of ambition that is kind of nurtured there that I've seen in show business that is disconcerting. Now, I'm not saying that you can't get a good education at Harvard. I'm just saying that they've created fascists and very popular comedy writers. So, but I mean, the question about Oxford is, I guess, who did I talk to? Was it Sacha Baron Cohen? Was he an Oxford graduate?
I can't remember if he was Oxford or Cambridge. But I know John Oliver went to Cambridge.
Okay, and the difference between the two is what? They're in different towns, or
nothing much. Like one's light blue, one's dark blue. I don't know if that's the colour of people's blood or what, but it's there's not a great deal of difference. I don't know.
And the structure of the education, like, were you able to, like, you well-rounded intellectually? You seem to.
I don't know if well-rounded is the right description. I mean, it is, it's a fascinating place, but there's particularly doing the type of study I did. It's not got huge applications to the real world, but I had a great time there. And
yeah, but what is the real world? I mean, the real world is you like to think. You're a thinker. You're a guy who looks at the world and processes it politically and philosophically and socially, and you comment on it. I would imagine that the education you got was perfect for that.
I guess so, yes. And like I said, I ended up doing comedy, which I'd slightly studied as part of my ancient Greek side of things.
What was the other option? I mean, how did you arrive at that?
Well, that was part of the literature course. So it was the ancient Greek literature was the tragedies and epic poetry, the Homer, and so studying the sort of foundations of European civilization.
But how did you decide to do comedy?
Like, well, I think just because I was just interested by it, and I'd done a little bit of it at school, and it was just struck me as being an interesting thing to study. How did comedy work in a completely different, ancient, dead civilization? And I think it shows a lot. A society's comedy tells you a lot about that society in a way that, say, studying the tragedies, which were sort of less topical and more sort of universal, didn't necessarily give you an idea of what it would have been like to be an ancient Athenian. Whereas when you think the comedy is aiming at making the people watching it at the time laugh, and so you can then start to understand people's sense of humour, and therefore you can almost build up a picture of what life would have been like, how people would have talked to each other, how they would have tried to make each other laugh. So I guess there's certain sort of timeless universalities about that were. But
what comic? When did you realize I can do that? What did you see a stand up?
Well, my first ever gig was A, very drunk, and B, it was a comedy night while I was a student at Oxford in our college, and a friend had organised it, and the headline act rang up half an hour before saying he couldn't make it, and I was just going to sort of introduce it and do a couple of bits in between. And so I had to sort of try and fill a bit more time, and the support act did a longer set. And I had about half an hour's notice of this, and I got very drunk and can't remember anything that I said, but I remember the sort of surge of adrenaline of doing it, which is one of the addictive things about stand-up. And so
you remember for 30 seconds I didn't feel as drunk as I was.
Exactly, and I've never been a particular drinker, but it was I guess the nerves and the tension. So that was my first attempt at stand-up. I then had a few gigs when I left university that went so badly that I gave up for about a year and a half.
Well, what was the other option for work for you? Like, if it wasn't stand-up, what were you headed towards? Teaching?
Well, I don't know. I sort of had a vague idea that I wanted to be a journalist, and particularly a sports journalist. And left university, applied for about 80 jobs, ended up getting a job sub-editing articles about European finance, which was slightly less exciting than it sounds, Mark.
Lasted sounds riveting. I'm surprised.
Lasted about a year, and then just gave up, and started doing the open mic circuit in London. And
who was around? Who were the guys that that you started with that are still around?
Well, I mean, John was starting out around about the same time. Russell Howard was starting around then. Jimmy Carr, people who've been very successful here. Daniel Kitson was sort of the big, the most successful kind of comedian of my generation creatively here, and he was, I think, someone that everyone of my generation on the circuit sort of looked up to. He was starting.
Yeah. I mean, I heard about Kitson for years, and I think I saw one big show of his in London. I know he's a unique person.
Yeah.
Doesn't do the podcast or talk or function necessarily in a sociable way. But I've met him a few times, and I know that he's revered.
Yes.
So he was of your generation or a little ahead of you, yeah?
Well, he'd started a bit before me. I mean, there were, in terms of sort of gigs that were kind of landmarks in my early stand-up career. There was one in particular. I went to see Robert Newman, who'd been a huge TV star in the early 90s.
Yeah.
Various shows. But he'd become kind of crusading, almost journalistic stand-up, and he went to do an hour and a half in Edinburgh, largely about the perils of capitalism and globalization, and it was just hugely eye-opening that someone had the courage to do that, and the skills to make it interesting, the charisma to carry it off, and that was while I was up doing that package show I mentioned in Edinburgh, my first sort of full Edinburgh, when I was really struggling doing a late night gig, and I didn't really have the skills for it. I'd only been going 18 months or so on the circuit, and there was a lot of things that I couldn't do, and I was becoming increasingly dissatisfied with the material I was doing, and seeing Robert Newman do such a fearless, uncompromising show made me think, well, maybe I need to not keep worrying about what is going to make the audience laugh, and think more why am I doing this, and what do I want to.
And that is the moment that we of inconsistent means all have, that powerful moment of enlightenment that dictates our struggle for the rest of our lives.
Exactly.
I don't need to make them laugh as long as I'm smart and blow their mind.
And that's why I'm sitting in a shed in South London as we speak.
Yeah, that's it, man. So what about Stuart Lee?
Well, I mean, that was another important gig for me. That was one I supported him at a charity night. And, I'd seen him on television. I'd never seen him doing live stand-up. And it was the lineup was Stuart Lee headlining, me as the support act, and after us was DJ Randy Groover, who was a DJ in a spangly jacket, playing some absolutely banging.
And please tell me, most people were
funk.
there to see him.
I think I can't really remember. Stuart Lee wasn't. I mean, he was quite well known, but he hadn't become the.
Was this before he quit and then come back?
I think he was just on the way back at that point.
Oh.
from memory. And then I did a few gigs supporting him on tour when he was briefly on a diet where he ate nothing but cabbage soup and had.
I remember that diet.
Come on the
was
train.
Was he fat?
Well, I think he had been. I don't know how much good it did him, but he didn't seem to be enjoying it very much. But it was.